Drug lords were more than criminals. They were kings of empires built on powder and blood, men and women who rewrote the rules of crime on a global scale. They didn't just sell drugs, they created economies, destabilized governments, and turned entire cities into war zones. Hollywood turned them into legends, but the real stories were darker, bloodier, and far more shocking. At the center was Pablo Escobar, the king of cocaine, whose Medellín cartel made billions and left Colombia in flames. Then came Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, the master of tunnels and legendary prison escapes, whose Sinaloa Cartel grew into the most powerful in Mexico. Griselda Blanco, the godmother of cocaine, pioneered the Miami connection, leaving bodies in the streets and terror in her wake. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the lord of the skies, filled the skies with jets packed full of cocaine, earning billions before dying on the operating table. And Miguel Gallardo, El Padrino, the godfather who built the foundation of the modern Mexican drug trade. Each one carried the same title, drug lord, but each ruled in their own way, leaving behind a trail of violence, money, and broken nations. This is their untold story. In the 1980s, no name struck fear and fascination like Pablo Escobar. To some he was a Robin Hood, to others he was a terrorist, to the world he was the king of cocaine. At the height of his power, Escobar's Medellín cartel supplied 80% of the world's cocaine, pulling in an estimated $420 million a week. He wasn't just a drug dealer, he was one of the richest men alive. Escobar was born in 1949 in Rio Negro, Colombia, and grew up in Medellín. From petty crimes like car theft and smuggling, he rose quickly in the underworld. But when cocaine exploded in demand in the late 70s, Escobar seized the market. He built smuggling routes that stretched from Colombia's jungles to Miami's nightclubs. He bought planes, submarines, even his own fleet of trucks. If there was a way to move cocaine, Escobar used it. But his empire wasn't built on logistics alone. It was built on fear. Escobar's motto was simple: plata o plomo, silver or lead. Politicians, judges, police, take his bribes or take his bullets. And many chose the latter. Entire courtrooms were blown up, presidential candidates assassinated, and neighborhoods turned into war zones. At the same time, Escobar funded housing projects, soccer fields, and handed out cash to the poor. For some Colombians he was a savior, for others he was a monster. By the late 80s, Escobar was at war with the Colombian government, the US DEA, and rival cartels. His private army planted bombs in cities, killed hundreds of police officers, and even brought down a passenger jet. The violence turned Medellín into the murder capital of the world, but power built on blood cannot last. In 1993, after years on the run, Escobar was tracked down by Colombian forces. He died on a rooftop in Medellín, barefoot and bleeding, his empire crumbling with him. Escobar's reign showed the world what a drug lord could become, not just a criminal, but a king who ruled a nation in all but name. And after his fall, new kings rose to take his place. The most infamous of them was Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. If Pablo Escobar was the king of cocaine, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán became the face of the modern drug trade. Short in height but towering in legend, El Chapo led the Sinaloa Cartel, a global empire worth billions. He wasn't just known for moving cocaine, heroin, and meth. He was famous for doing the impossible, escaping prisons and the grip of law enforcement again and again. Born in 1957 in rural Sinaloa, Mexico, Guzmán grew up poor, working in poppy fields. By his teens he was already in the drug business, climbing through the ranks under Miguel Gallardo. When Gallardo's empire fractured in the late 80s, El Chapo founded his own operation, his specialty tunnels. Guzmán used underground passageways at the US-Mexico border to smuggle tons of drugs, making billions while staying steps ahead of authorities. His reputation wasn't built only on logistics, it was built on ruthlessness. Guzmán ordered massacres, assassinations, and torture to keep rivals in check. Entire towns in Mexico became battlegrounds as the Sinaloa Cartel fought for dominance. Still, he cultivated an image as a man of the people, handing out money to the poor, building roads, and earning a strange kind of loyalty. El Chapo's legend grew through his escapes. In 2001, he slipped out of a high-security Mexican prison hidden in a laundry cart. In 2015, he did it again, vanishing through a mile-long tunnel dug directly into his cell. Each time, the world watched in disbelief as the most wanted drug lord on earth vanished like smoke. But no escape lasts forever. In 2016, Guzmán was captured once more, this time extradited to the United States. In 2019, He was sentenced to life plus 30 years in a maximum security prison, where escape is impossible. El Chapo's reign proved that even in the 21st century, a drug lord could become larger than life. He was a ghost in the tunnels, a billionaire in the shadows, and a symbol of Mexico's cartel wars. But while he burned bright, his story was far from the only one. Long before him, there was a woman who turned Miami into a battlefield, the godmother of cocaine. Before El Chapo, before Escobar became a household name, there was Griselda Blanco, the woman who brought the cocaine trade to the United States. They called her the godmother of cocaine, and for good reason. She pioneered the Miami-Colombia pipeline in the 1970s and 80s, flooding Florida with cocaine and leaving a trail of bodies behind. Born in 1943 in Cartagena, Colombia, Blanco grew up surrounded by poverty and crime. By her teens she was already involved in pickpocketing and prostitution. But Griselda had bigger ambitions. She married into the drug world and eventually built her own smuggling network. Unlike many traffickers of her time, she understood America was the true gold mine. Miami became her playground and her battlefield. Blanco innovated the smuggling game. She used women, children, and even lingerie with hidden compartments to transport cocaine into the U.S. Her network moved tons of product, generating billions. But what set her apart wasn't just cunning, it was her ruthlessness. Blanco ordered assassinations casually, often over minor slights. She earned the nickname La Madrina, feared not just in Colombia but across Miami. The 1980s in Miami were called the cocaine cowboy era, and Blanco was at the center. Drive-by shootings, bloody turf wars, and massacres turned the city into a war zone. Her cartel clashed with rivals in public shootouts that shocked America, making headlines nationwide. While Escobar was building his empire in Colombia, Blanco was already showing how profitable and deadly the U.S. market could be. But her empire couldn't last. In 1985, she was arrested and sentenced to decades in prison. Even behind bars, her legend grew. Netflix series and documentaries would later turn her into a symbol of the drug wars. After her release, she returned to Medellín, living quietly until 2012, when she was gunned down outside a butcher shop, executed in the same style she had perfected decades earlier. Griselda Blanco proved that the drug trade wasn't just a man's world. She was as ruthless, cunning, and feared as any of the kings. But while she reigned in Miami, another drug lord took to the skies, filling them with jets loaded with cocaine. His name was Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies. Before El Chapo, before the Lord of the Skies, there was Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo. They called him El Padrino, the Godfather, because he laid the foundation for the modern Mexican drug trade. Every cartel that came after traces its roots back to him. Born in 1946 in Sinaloa, Gallardo began his career not as a gangster but as a police officer and bodyguard for the governor of the state. That position gave him access to powerful political networks and protection he would later use to build his empire. By the late 1970s, Gallardo was smuggling marijuana and heroin into the United States. But when cocaine demand exploded, he made a bold move. He partnered with Colombia's Medellín cartel. Gallardo created a system. He organized traffickers across Mexico into one syndicate, the Guadalajara cartel, controlling routes, prices, and logistics. Instead of chaos and competition, Gallardo built structure. His organization became the bridge between Colombian suppliers and the booming U.S. market. For years, tons of cocaine flowed north under his control, earning billions and embedding Mexican cartels into global crime forever. But power invites betrayal. In 1985, DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered in Mexico. The U.S. was outraged, and all eyes turned to Gallardo. Pressure mounted, and his protection began to crumble. In 1989, he was arrested and sentenced to decades in prison. Gallardo's capture shattered the Guadalajara cartel, and with it the unity of the Mexican drug world. Out of the wreckage came new cartels, Tijuana, Sinaloa, Juarez, all splintering into rivals that would plunge Mexico into decades of bloodshed. El Padrino's vision created order, but his fall unleashed chaos. Today Gallardo is an old man behind bars, nearly blind, his empire long gone, but his fingerprints remain on every cartel that followed. He wasn't just a drug lord, he was the architect of an entire system, and with him our story comes full circle. From Escobar's billions, to El Chapo's escapes, from Griselda's Miami reign to Carrillo's jets, and Gallardo's foundation, these were the drug lords who shaped history. These men and women, Escobar, Guzmán, Blanco, Carrillo, Félix Gallardo, they were not just criminals. They were emperors of powder, building kingdoms on blood and fear. Each ruled in their own way, some with terror, some with innovation, some with charm, but all shared the same fate. Empires built on cocaine do not last. They burn too brightly, and they leave only ashes. Escobar turned Medellín into a battlefield and died on a rooftop. El Chapo ruled tunnels and headlines, but ended in a cage. Griselda Blanco stained Miami with blood and fell to her own methods. Carrillo filled the skies with cocaine and died on an operating table. And Felix Gallardo, the Godfather, created order, only to spend his final days blind behind prison walls. Power in this world is not eternal. It is borrowed, it is paid for in blood. And no matter how high they rise, the fall always comes. The world remembers their names, but never their peace.